Hey, beautiful people, you know what time it is. It's a chat with Rashina. And I want to encourage you with this fact. Here's the thing. The enemy will keep us distracted. That's a trick of the enemy. He will keep us focused and looking at the wrong thing. A lot of times we pray and we ask God for things. We pray and we ask God to take us in spaces and places to solve a problem. And then we get mad when we see the problem, but we won't solve the problem. The trick of the enemy is to keep us distracted in the marketplace, in the workplace, what they're not doing, what they haven't done, the systems that they haven't put in order. You see it. Be the answer to the problem. So I've been in this masterclass for 2 days with Dr. Darius Daniels, and he speaks explicitly about this, that a lot of times when we get into these work spaces that we feel like we're frustrated, we feel like we're stressed. And he was like, no, you're in warfare because you've been called to solve a problem. He said, we have 168 days in a week. He said, how many do you spend at church? The average person that does not work in ministry full time spends 3 to 4 hours in church. What are you doing with the rest of your giftings? What are you doing with the rest of the things that God has called you to do? You are called to the marketplace. You are called to discover your purpose. You're called to develop your purpose, and you're called to deploy your purpose into the marketplace. You add value into the marketplace, whether people see it or not. And then you extract from the marketplace as well. So I just want to encourage you, don't be distracted by what you go up against Monday through Friday. You've been called to it. So ask God for strategy. He said, what shows up when you show up? What shows up when you show up into the boardroom? What shows up when you show into the classroom? What shows up when you walk into that space that God has opened doors for you? What shows up? And that's what you add. That's the value that you add. So don't be distracted by everything else that's circling around you, but you go in and you do and you deploy the gifts and the talents that God has placed on the inside of you, and you add value to the marketplace. And that's how we add to the kingdom, because a lot of times we're called into the darkness so that we can shed light in the darkness. Everybody is not working in full-time ministry. So don't sit down on your gifts because you're not in the church, because you're not behind the pulpit, because you're not teaching a Sunday school class. That's 10% of who God's called you to be, but you work in the marketplace. And he spoke about how Jesus spent, and Peter spent, Paul spent 95% of their times when they ministered, it was in the marketplace. They were examples in the marketplace. They used their giftings in the marketplace. And that's what God has called us to do. We're waiting for everybody to come to the church. You are the church. Be the church in the marketplace and let your gifts shine. What shows up when you show up? And I had to think about that in my life, and I wrote down, intentionality shows up when I show up. I operate in the spirit of excellence everywhere I go. Structure shows up. Structure shows up. Organization shows up when I step into a space. And that's where I know God has gifted me. The gift of helps, to be able to look at a thing. Like, I can go in and I can look at a project and I can say, okay, these are the steps. This is how we're supposed to put this thing together. And I can also see gaps. I can also forecast, like, we might have an issue with this. We might have an issue with that. So what do? I build in those things. So when we begin to roll, when those cylinders begin to fire off and we begin to roll, we can continue to roll this steamboat along, because we've already looked at the total picture and we said, okay, well, let's organize this and let's shore up this, because we might have some issues down the line. So what shows up when you show up? What are those spiritual giftings? What are those natural abilities that God has given you? What are those acquired skills that you have worked in, that you've added to your tool belt? What is the spiritual giftings that God has placed on the inside of you? And here's the thing. He said, if you have the gift of prophecy, I operate in the prophetic realm. He said, we don't go into the boardroom saying, thus saith the Lord. No, you ask prophetic questions. You learn how to take that spiritual gift that God has placed on the inside of you and how to use it in the mass and use it in the marketplace. But you can't go in the church's way into the marketplace. It won't work that way. People are going to think that you're crazy and they will not talk to you. But how do you take those spiritual gifts and you deploy them into the marketplace? That's what we're called. So don't be distracted by what's not happening in your job when you've been called to solve the issue.